Hey David, I wanted to take the time to give you a little bit more of a personal reply to your comment and your question. So I did read the paper, and the paper has a couple of main points. Main point number one is that mega constellations like Starlink are going to have a great impact on observatories like the Rubin Observatory, who surveys the whole night sky. So they're going to be streaking across. Number two is that this damage cannot be mitigated through space-based telescopes or other means. Main point three, which kind of gets into the specifics of the Starlink constellation and your point in question specifically, is that the people who can afford it don't match up with the people who need it. Therefore, its impact is going to be minimal and does not justify ruining the night sky, essentially. And main point five, which is along that same line, is that its impact is going to be minimal. Look, they don't even have the bandwidth to handle major cities, and kind of along the same lines that it's not worth ruining the sky for. So this paper is quite weak in a number of areas if you actually hold it up to scrutiny. So what you referenced was projected business models. So where are they getting this 2 to 3% of people that it can serve, and then it won't play a major role in major cities? If you look at the citations, they're getting this from an Ars Technica article, which is referencing the YouTube video of Elon Musk at a satellite conference, and both of those citations are in there. If you actually click on that citation, the Ars Technica one, go and read that paragraph where it says that 2 to 3% of the population will be served, and that it won't play a major role, and it's not a competitor for major telecoms. What does that next paragraph say? It says the reason for why he's doing this, he's likely trying to represent himself as not a major threat to the telecoms, and that's because at this time, the telecoms and Starlink were in a major battle for rural broadband subsidies. They were arguing over who gets it. The SpaceX isn't even qualified to get it, and that the frequencies that they're using has been reserved for other means. So they're in a big battle. So if you actually do the math on what each Starlink satellite is capable of, what that adds up to is the original 1,440 satellites is capable of doing that, and indeed. So that's what we call a minimum viable product, and this is par for the course in anything that Elon Musk does, is always minimum viable product, get your foot in the door and then wedge it out wider. So there is plans for, they've FCC approved for about 17,000 of them, and they've applied for another 30,000. They've actually recently applied for up to 1 million. So this is just the beginning of the capabilities of Starlink. So this addresses that point. It's a refutation of the point that it's not going to be impactful on a major worldwide level. It doesn't match up to the hype, basically. It's kind of what your point was getting at. And the thing is, yes, it does have that capability of serving a significant portion of the world's population, and just not off of the minimum viable product. Number two is that it's too expensive and it's not going to have an impact. So let's look at why people don't have internet access. And it doesn't matter if it's in the United States or if it's in rural Kenya. Let's look at the United States. About 6% of America does not have access to reliable internet. That's crazy. That's per the FCC. Most of those, almost all, not all, but most, are in rural communities. And then the native population, the Native Americans, are even worse. A whole third of them don't have access to internet. Why? That's because if you live in a small community, it doesn't make any economic sense to go in there and put a cell phone tower. And again, that's here in the United States or in rural Tanzania, wherever, take your pick. Because the cost, the barrier cost, is very high, and they need to recoup that with larger populations. Cost of a cell phone tower, $200,000 a year approximately to lease, and you have to recoup all of that. If you want to lay cable, if you want to lay fiber, it's the same thing. The barrier to lay cable is much higher than even a cell phone tower. Cell phone's kind of low-hanging fruit, putting a tower there. So what this does is, even though it's maybe $60 at the end of it with a couple $100 for the phased array antenna, is it completely democratizes the internet. Now, if you wanted to, you could do it. Let's say you're in rural Tanzania, a poor country, much poorer than Kenya. Small villages all over the place, not well served by internet. The internet, most people have some spotty access at best. Well, let's say you have Starlink. Now we don't have this barrier of laying cable, of having a cell phone tower, and satellite options which are not suitable for high-speed use. You're not going to be watching videos. You're not going to be going to an online university to educate yourself, not with the type of internet that's available on airplanes. It's terrible. So perhaps that one individual can't afford it, but the community gets together, which is how they do decisions in rural Tanzania, where they have community-oriented government. They come to a consensus and they decide to buy a Starlink terminal for their school. They can do that, and it costs nothing relative to what the obstacle is for other traditional means. So this is going to take place worldwide. The impacts of this are tremendous. What would the impact be just here in the United States? I follow your tweets. I know that you're not a huge fan of Trump. What fuels Trump? What fuels Trump is a national populist movement. What fuels national populism? What are the factors that fuel that? It's not socioeconomic status. It's not religion. The number one thing that determines and can predict if somebody's going to vote for a national populist leader is education level. These are the people that need it the most. And I know you're not arguing against internet access, but this is the way to internet access for these populations which can't be targeted profitably. Not only can they not be targeted profitably, but they can't even be targeted with a massive multi-billion-dollar subsidies. It's a huge problem. So anyways, back to my point about this person in rural America. Their parents want them to become a farmer. Parents aren't particularly educated. They provide a valuable service for our civilization, farming or what have you. But this person wants to get out of this town of 100. He wants to get out of small town America. How does he do that when his parents want him to work on the farm all day? Well, at night he can come home, maybe watch some Netflix, as another commenter posted sarcastically that it's just going to be middle-class people watching Netflix. This person isn't middle class. He's a farmer. He lives in a nice house. But now he can actually take an online course. He could educate himself. He's empowered. And that's why the UN Human Rights Council has access to internet being an enabler of human rights. Not a human right, but an enabler of human right. And all the downstream consequences that internet access has. So I think I'll end it there. Look forward to your reply.